Hello, Money Movers. Welcome to another episode of Her Money Moves, where we learn how top women make it big and unlock financial independence. I'm your host, Staci LaToison. We're recording live from the WPO Entrepreneurial Excellence Forum, and I cannot even explain just how excited I am about this episode. This incredible powerhouse woman inspired me 2 years ago when I attended the Energizing Women Conference, and her story is unbelievable. So we have the pleasure and the honor of hosting Merrilee Kick. Merrilee started BuzzBallz as a high school teacher, turning a class project into a multi-million-dollar business that stands out for its unique single-serve packaging and diverse product range. So you see it in Buc-ee's and Specs and all the liquor stores around the globe. Under her leadership, BuzzBallz has grown exponentially and expanded its reach internationally. Its value has skyrocketed and was acquired by Sazerac, the company that makes Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey. Merrilee, this is a dream come true for me.
Thank you.
To interview you. You have no idea, you've been on my list for a while, and you're like, who the hell are you?
Didn't know I inspired you 2 years ago. Thank you.
Yes. I mean, truly to believe. I was at Chevron for 22 years, working corporate, and had just started my entrepreneurial journey when I heard you speak. Really felt like, okay, if she can do it, I can do it.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important for us to share our story. So can you please tell us about yourself and what sparked your inspiration?
Well, I mean, I don't know how far we go back, but, I grew up in Montana. My family was not very well to do. I worked a farm. I, did everything at the house. Killed our own animals, ate it, killed our deer, ate that, So, I mean, we grew up having to make something out of nothing. And I think that was the spark that was embedded in me at a young age, but I didn't know what someday that would mean. I went off to college, and my mother suggested that I graduate in 4 years instead of the normal 5, which a lot of people were graduating. And then she wanted me to get 3 degrees. So I got 3 degrees in 4 years, got hired by Ross Perot, moved to Texas. And Ross Perot owned an IT company at the time. So I worked 110 hours a week on his IT company, making computer programs for him. Moved to Africa, moved to Sweden, and then came back to Dallas. And I was about to get a divorce because we just kind of had grown apart. And I was a high school teacher at the time. After all that experience and all those diverse jobs, the teaching job was great because I could have time with my kids in the summer and on holidays and things like that. And my kids were at the age where they really needed me still. So I became a teacher, and then they had a teacher enrichment program where I could go get my master's degree. And so while I was grading papers at the pool, I was trying to think of what my master's degree thesis project was going to be. And I thought, what survives in good times and bad? And so I thought, all the sins survive always, so drugs, gambling, sex, booze, all of those types of things. And I thought, well, one of those is legal, so I will choose the booze. And at the time I was about to get that divorce. I'd never actually got the divorce later, come to tell the truth, but it was a fear of mine. And I thought, I have to have some financial freedom, financial independence. I have to be able to take care of myself and rely on myself, only myself, and I have to provide for my kids and my family. So that was the spark behind why did I start. But I think just all the things that happened in my life, it hasn't been an easy road, and you just have to learn how to overcome those obstacles along the way.
Wow. So you've built not just a product, but a whole new category.
Yeah.
In the drinks market.
Yeah. I didn't know I was doing that. I just created something that I wanted. I wanted to create a ready to drink cocktail in a ball shape that was safe for the pool, and make consumers buy it by the ball instead of a 4-pack or a 6-pack. I didn't want to force them into buying more than they wanted. I wanted them to mix and match the flavors. And so this whole innovation came about, and I kind of started this groundswell of making high-proof alcoholic drinks that were high in flavor and at a really reasonable price. So I didn't know I was inventing a category back in 2010, and it's kind of grown. So now we're the number one ready to drink cocktail in the US. I never had that as a goal ever. When I started this company, I just wanted to survive. I wanted to make $100,000 a year. I wanted to be able to be self-sufficient and not live out of my car. So, I mean, it's come a long way since then. And then just recently, this is after 14 years of doing this, and doing every job in my plant. I recently sold to a company called Sazerac. You said earlier, the makers of Fireball and Buffalo Trace. They have 400 brands, and they're about 10 times my size. My company's valued at $1.4 billion, and
Wow.
They're bigger than we are by about 10 times. And I needed that strength and that muscle to get to the next level, to grow more internationally. We're in 29 countries, but they're in almost every country that counts, that uses alcohol or has alcohol for sale. So I wanted to have that capability to leverage what they had and then kind of be a supplement to their already expansive porportfolio.
Wow. And you also had like exponential growth in
Yeah.
just 13 years is a pretty short time
Yeah.
to become $1 billion company.
Yeah.
What are some of the strategies that you can share that helped you to scale so quickly?
Well, number one, I had to do everything myself and, learn the business and batch the product. I had to do the shipping. I had to do the taxes. I had to do the marketing. I had to do the sales, all of that. I had to clean the bathrooms in the warehouse. I had to do everything. I mean, everything. But, some of the other things is being vertically integrated. So what that means is making the container, putting the label on the container, doing the batching, filling it, prepping it, boxing it, getting it ready for sale, and then supporting the sales team out in the market, and then advertising it to the consumers so that consumers would know where to buy it and what it was. So, I had to do everything from the top of creation all the way through down to consumption at the consumer level. And so that vertical integration was critical for me. If I would have had somebody else create it for me, it would have been totally different because I would have been stuck with their lead time problems, their machinery issues, and I wouldn't have any recourse to fix it. So I really wanted to be independent. I really wanted to have that control. And so I just did everything myself. I learned how to do it myself. I maybe had to do it a little slower than maybe somebody with a whole bunch of capital equipment, but I learned how to do it. And then I could expand on that.
So you've built a brand that's synonymous with fun and spontaneity.
Yeah.
Every entrepreneur has their secret sauce, or in your case, the perfect mix. So what's your recipe for balancing creativity with commerce?
Creativity with commerce. Well, I think innovation is the key to success. You have to hold on to your core of what you're good at, but then you have to constantly innovate. Just think of it as like if you had a singer that never ever made a new song, you would listen to that singer for a while, but then, if they never came out with anything new, it would be a problem for you. So when I started the company, I wanted to call it Party Balls to begin with, and I found out that Miller Coors owned that trademark, so I couldn't use it. But then I looked online and found that Miller Coors didn't buy their domain name. And so I went out and I bought the domain name and I pointed it toward my company name, which then became BuzzBallz. And I kind of came up with that name because I thought, it's a ball shape. I want people to look at this ball and I want them to associate it with alcohol and I want them to associate it with fun and having a good time. And I want it colorful and interesting. And I want it to not be stiff and stuffy. So like when we came up with names, we would sit in my office and my small group of people, and our very first drink was a screwdriver, and it was an orange juice and vodka, and we called it OJ Screamer, named after our old pal OJ. And so we thought that was just so damn funny, and like one of the funny names now that we have out in Ireland, which I think we have to change the name anyway, just to be socially cool. It's Porn Star Martini. And we're changing that to passion fruit martini. But, it's fun. People love our drinks because they can get a good laugh and they can get a great drink at a good price. It's got a lot of flavor in it, got a lot of alcohol in it, which is the niche I'm in. I can't be everything to everybody, which is one of the things I was talking about earlier today. If you try to be everything to everybody, you lose. You lose who you are. You lose your identity, and you lose your core consumer that really liked you to begin with.
So take us back to that moment when you first saw your own creation out there. You go to the store, and how exciting was that?
It was so exciting. I remember our first 100 stores in Dallas, Texas, and we were at a UT tailgate party, and we were trying to promote it, to consumers that were going to the tailgates and giving away free samples, and they were like, well, these are really great. Where can I buy them? I'm like, oh my gosh, I only have 100 stores, so let me point you to every single store that I know carries it. And, we had hit or miss luck. One of my distributors tried to quarantine our products. He was actually pretty horrible to me. He wanted to see my certificates. He wanted to see the FDA proof that it was safe. He wanted to see just all of this extra scrutiny on me. And I thought, why is he doing this? I wonder if he does this to everybody, because seems odd. And I found out he was just being a dick, and I didn't like it. And I've never actually forgiven him for it.
Yeah, as you shouldn't.
No, the product has exceeded anything that I ever thought it would do. Consumer demand, it's almost like a cult following, people love it, which is amazing to me. It makes me feel so good that I have a well-known brand name now, because it wasn't always that way. It used to be that I'd have to show them a picture, explain what it was and try to tell them where to buy it. And we've just come a long way.
So how did it feel to see your vision realized in such a tangible way?
Oh, it feels great. I'm just really proud of it. It's something to have a legacy on, something I built.
Mm-hmm. And with that first success under your belt, what did you learn from that experience that helped shape the next stage and steps for BuzzBallz?
What I learned by doing everything myself was that it's difficult, but it's easier for me then later, once I know how to do everything in the company, to transform that into somebody else's job, and delegate that. Had I not done it myself, I wouldn't know how hard it was, or I wouldn't understand all the intricacies on the equipment or what was going on. So being able to have that experience and then being able to say, okay, now we've done this, now let's build upon it and grow that, so we just kept building on and expanding the base of the company to where it just started getting bigger and bigger, and the offerings were bigger and more, and our capabilities were bigger and better and faster. I remember the first time we got into Walmart, one of my employees that I hired, she was supposed to be a secretary for me, but she had, I thought, great personality and great skills. So I hired her and I said, why don't you be in sales? And she was like, okay. And so I sent her to Missouri, and she said, well, while I was out trying to sell in the stores, I met this guy, Nick Knepp, in Walmart, and he said, hey, this is pretty cool. Why don't I give you a test store, and we can see how you do, see how it does. And what happened was she called me and told me, and I was like, oh my God, this is so great. We're going to be in Walmart in Missouri, and I didn't know, anything other than that. And I was like, well, I wonder how many cases we're going to sell. Ended up, she called me back. She goes, I've got some different news for you. We're not going to be in one Walmart. She goes, we're going to be in 350 Walmarts. I'm like, oh my God. So it was like, oh my God. And then that Nick Knepp guy, same guy from Walmart, said, hey, I want to bring you to Bentonville, Arkansas, where our headquarters are. And I want you to meet all the other alcohol buyers. And then you can showcase your stuff to them. So I did. And then most of them liked the product and liked what we were doing. But then there were some that were really naysayers that didn't like it. One lady didn't like the font. She goes, looks like Finding Nemo. I don't know. It looks like it appeals to kids, and so she wouldn't bring it in. Another guy was just kind of, not interested, It's like, yeah, no, I don't really like that product, so I'm not going to bring it in. The others brought it in and they went gangbusters with it. So it was really good. Then, so we doubled our income that year. That was back in 2014. So we doubled our income from like 12 million to 24 million. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so great. Then Walmart had a new idea. They called it the Clean Floor Initiative, where they took off all the dump bins, and our product was a dump bin on the floor filled with BuzzBallz. They took off all the dump bins and said, we don't want this clutter on the floor anymore. Carts are bumping into things. And, we want you to build something that is a saddlebag rack on the side of the aisle that attaches to the racks. So we go out, do all this R&D, create a custom rack, and then Walmart didn't want us anymore. They just decided they didn't want us. And so here I've chopped my revenue in half. I've developed this new R&D. I still have no idea if they're going to buy or not going to buy. And they just kind of disappeared. And I was like, oh my gosh, lesson learned. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, And then same thing with, developing things all yourself. If you're not emboldened to somebody else or under contract to get so many units out by somebody else making your product for you, then you have that control. You can lay people off. You can have them do different things. You can make alternative products. So back in that time, we were like, okay, well, maybe RTDs aren't going to survive. Maybe we should make some bourbon and some vodka and some gin and some rum. So we figured out how to make all those things. And so we created the Southern Champion line of spirits, learned how to do that, got the equipment up and rolling, and invested in that. And then we realized, well, we don't really have the sales skills to sell on premise like at bars and restaurants. We didn't really know how to do that. So it was kind of like kind of a mediocre failure. And we never really put money behind it. We really didn't know what we were doing. It's still there. We still drink it at our own bar at work, but it's fun. But really our passion is ready to drink cocktails, and we're doing really well at that. We were in a warehouse building that didn't have a sprinkler system in it. It was my first warehouse. It was 7,000 square feet. And I thought, well, this is fine. We got a certificate of occupancy, which means we had the permission to run and do what we were doing, making the alcoholic beverages. So this is like 2 or 3 years into our evolution of starting the business. Fire department comes in and says, we're worried that the amount of alcohol that you have in here is going to be unsafe and you might blow up the entire neighborhood. And so they said, either you get a sprinkler system in this rental building that I had, or you're going to have to move or shut down your operations. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so what am I going to do? I called the landlord who has the building, and he said, no, I'm not going to put it in for you. That's expensive. He goes, you can put it in. And that was to the tune of like $2 million. I didn't have that. And so I went around the corner and I saw a decrepit old building that was for sale. It was under foreclosure. It was filthy, rotten, dirty. And we bought it for a little over $1 million. And then I took my employees, because we were on fire watch and the fire department wouldn't let us produce anything. I'm like, okay, guys, you're a handyman now. You're going to go paint. You're going to deconstruct this building. We're going to throw stuff in the trash. We're going to just gut it. And so we did. We gutted this building. We cleaned, we scrubbed, we painted. And then we finally got a certificate of occupancy because that building had a sprinkler system that met the fire department code. And then we moved in our equipment. We didn't have a permission to move into the offices yet. But, so we were kind of like working hodgepodge. but the operations could run. But that shutdown in operations for a month and a half was, I mean, it was crippling. It was so crippling. We had so many orders coming in. We were way behind in orders. And, you know, I thought, okay, they're putting the death knell in us. But that was one. That was a bad one.
But then at the same time, now you own it.
Yeah,
right?
right.
Maybe it kind of was a good thing in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, it's way better. Yeah, it's way better. But at the time, sometimes these horrible things that happen to you end up being
the best
thing. Yeah.
Yes. So as you've expanded, how did you financially navigate funding for the business?
It was funny. I was just talking to somebody and she said, yeah, friends and family money didn't exist in my family. It didn't exist in mine either. I went out to try to get a loan and everybody said no. Every single bank I went to said no. I tried to play the woman card, you know, like maybe can I go in on your women's funding, whatever. And they're like, yeah, you can apply. But then nothing ever came of it. Every major bank turned me down. So I finally got in with this one little community bank and they came in and they said, look, it was 6 months after I had come to them. They finally came back and said, did anybody get back to you? I'm like, no. And so on one rainy December day, they showed up at my warehouse and I like, it was almost like I taped off bodies on the floor, but I taped off where the equipment would go if I had the money to buy it. And so I showed them pictures of the equipment and I'm like, this is what it would look like. This is the square footage of where it would go. This is how it would look. This is how it would feed. And this is what I want to do. And this is how much it's going to cost. Here's my budget. And they gave me $178,500, and that was in an SBA loan. And then they made me get a life insurance policy just in case I got hit by a truck and died. And they wanted to make sure it was exactly $178,500 so that they could get their money back. I used every single credit card I had. I used every single dentist deposit or receipt or return or anything that I had. I used my whole paycheck. And, you know, like I said, I was about to get a divorce and my husband's like, you're not using any of my money. It's my money, my 401k. Don't use any of my inheritance. Don't use any, you know, I was like, oh my God, I have nothing, you know, because I'd lived overseas. I'd lived in Africa. I'd lived in Sweden, all helping develop his career while I was a stay-at-home mom. And then I came back to this and I was like trying to build this and I had no money and I had no support. So I was like truly on my own. And I was like, I really need to figure out how to be financially independent without relying on him. Mm-hmm. So I started the company and I said, look, I'm going to use the deposit money that I got from inheritance that I put down on our house as collateral. It was $69,000. And I said, I'm going to put it down as collateral. And he said, well, that's our money. I'm like, no, that was my money. And I put it down on the house and I want to use that as collateral. I will pay it back, but I want to put that down on the house. And he said, all right, fine. And so he said he would sign the paperwork. I went to the bank. I was like so excited because I had this loan, $178,500. I go in to sign for it and they go, oh, you need to bring your husband with you. Oh, I'm like, oh no, you know, because he's not going to want to sign this. So I had to convince him, look, I've got collateral, it's on our house, and you also have to sign the paperwork, meaning you're responsible for it too. Well, he quickly moved his checking account to a different bank, you know, and just kind of separated funds. And so I truly was on my own. I went and I worked that business. My sons helped me work that business. And in about a year and a half, I paid back all those loans and became financially independent. All of a sudden, more banks started popping their heads in like, hey, you want a loan? I'm like, yeah, now that I don't need you, you know. So I got a line of credit and I got things going. And then JP Morgan Chase came along later because I needed a bigger bank with quicker funds and quick access to money and a personal banker type of thing. So I went to JP Morgan Chase and started our business banking there. But man, it was tough to get funding. It was so tough.
It is tough. And for some reason, we need it. And they're just not there for us as women.
No, not at the beginning. They're only there for you after you've made a fortune or after you've really done well and you have no debt. But it's like when you really need it, capital to expand, it's very difficult to get.
Yeah, hopefully things change.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Friends and family money is tough to come by because no friends or no family wants to give you money because they know they're probably not going to get it back. So.
So the marketing and brand is so distinct. Do you have any advice for entrepreneurs on differentiating your brand?
Yeah, I mean, I made my container look like I made the name of the product look like the container. So a BuzzBall, it looks like a ball, and you're not going to forget it. Once you hear the name BuzzBallz, I mean, if it was in a square package, you would say, I don't remember that name.
Yes.
But if I said, okay, well, what's the name of this product after I've showed it to you and you heard, oh, it's BuzzBallz. You know, once you've seen them, you know it. And it's such a catchy name.
It's the only one in that shape.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's plenty of companies that are trying to knock us off. We have one in India right now. We've got a couple of lawsuits out there where people are taking our intellectual property, copying our container because they want to be the next BuzzBall. Mm-hmm. They want to be BuzzBallz. And so just fighting them in court, it costs a lot of money. Had this been early on, it would have been very difficult to protect our company. Like if a big Coca-Cola came along or something like that way back in the beginning, you know, they could have buried us in legal fees. It would have bankrupted our company. Just trying to fight them to prove we were right. You know, because you don't get that money until after the lawsuits are over and settled.
Yep.
So all along the way, whether it's a year or 2 years or 3 years that it drags out, they're like taking all your market share in the market, selling all their products, getting better placement than yours. And then you've got all these legal fees, and then you might get awarded that in the very end. But it's tough to hire an attorney to do that.
Wow. What has been the most unexpected thing in your journey?
Well, my husband and I stayed together, so that was unexpected. That was good. The other thing is just the success of the brand. You know, I hired a guy, Blair Casey, one of the first guys that ever bought my brand at a distributor. And I thought, I don't have the time or the network that you have. You know everybody in the alcoholic beverage space that would buy our product. I need your network, and I need you to come on board and help me sell this stuff. And he did, and he hired a team, and he went out there and did what he did. He's full of energy, full of vim and vigor. And he went out there and just knocked it out of the ballpark, gave him some great goals, and he was like, okay. And he went out and did it. I mean, if it were just me having to do it by myself, it would have taken much longer. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Tracy Frisbee. Hired her to come in from alcoholic beverage background and do the marketing, the shopper marketing. So she knows how to sell the product, how to support sales, how to build the brand in the consumer's mind, how to tone it down a little bit so you know you're not going to have these edgy, screamy names like I had at the very beginning. They're going to be more palatable for a Kroger or an Albertsons or a big grocery chain to take us in, because the big grocery chains are going, I don't know if we can really put that out there for our consumers. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wait a minute, you're selling condoms and lube and adult toys back there. Why can't you sell BuzzBallz? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, well, we have standards, I'm like, okay, I got you.
So reflecting on everything you've accomplished and having this successful exit, can you tell us more about the process of navigating an exit, how to prepare for that?
Okay. So an exit is something that I didn't know how to do. And, I told you my husband and I didn't get a divorce. My husband is an expert at selling companies. He used to do that in the IT world. And so when I hired him in 2018 to be my CFO, that was one of the first things he did, was figure out how to do the exit and what kind of goals. So we set a 3 to 5 year goal as to revenue benchmarks that we wanted to hit. And then we also did a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats every year when we did goal planning. And we figured out, what were our weaknesses, what were our threats, and what kinds of things did we really want to improve on to include in our core competencies. And if we could do those things, if we could build those things, then it would be more revenue. And then we'd do a budget and figure out how much does that cost, because we were vertically integrated. We're going to do this ourselves. How much would this cost? How much time does this take? and then create the budget that would go along with that. And then we would try to hit those benchmarks that we said we were going to try to hit by a certain time. Maybe we were opening a new market. Maybe we were starting a new brand or a new flavor extension or something like that. So the process of setting up for a sale is not only knowing your strengths and weaknesses, but your budgeting and your forecast, but also it's something called a data room. And the data room is like this big online cloud where you store every contract you've ever had, every agreement you've ever had, every employee that you've ever had, all the background on that, all your financials, all of your capital equipment, all your assets, everything that you have is stored in this data room. Gathering all that stuff up takes a long time, and most companies don't keep it together in a organized manner. So going out and finding this stuff is like going on a treasure hunt and like, okay, we got to find where we put that contract, or where was this agreement, or whatever. Where's the employee handbook? And, you know, has it changed? And did everybody sign it? Is everybody legal to work here? Do we do drug tests on everybody? You know, all those things have to go into this data room. Once you get the data room set up, then you create something called a CIM, a CIM. It's a memorandum, and it's basically a company information document, kind of like an executive summary that talks about, here's what we're going to do, here's who we are, here's where our future forecast is, here's some of our equipment, here's all of our properties that we own, here's what we make, all of our products. And you put all this together in a nice little pretty package so that you can present that to a buyer. So once you get an idea of like who would be a potential buyer for you, it's either a private equity company or a strategic buyer. A private equity company is somebody that just invests in business for a return to sell it later. Or a strategic buyer is somebody that's in that space already, competing possibly against you. You risk yourself and your company data by showing them your company data, because they might not buy you, you know, but they have all this leverage now. They know all your secrets,
all your IP,
everything. So you're risking it by exposing it. So you really don't want to just do a big wide process where you show everybody. You know, you want to select who you want to show this to, and then make sure that they're absolutely serious. And so you sign them into a promissory note kind of thing, you know, like they're going to make an indicative offer, but it's a promised indicative offer. So basically, once they go through your data room and comb through all your dirty details, and they've verified that your quality of your earnings has been audited, and then it's been audited by somebody other than your mother-in-law's firm, you know, it's like a Price Waterhouse or something like that. You know, they're looking at, is this a solid company with real earnings and real earnings potential? And then they'll come in and say, okay, we're going to make you an offer. And then after that offer is made, the federal government goes through something called HSR approval. Now, what that is let's say that I was going to sell to a big giant company, and that big giant company did ready-to-drink cocktails just like I do. Well, the federal government's going to go in there. The Federal Trade Commission is going to go in. The Department of Justice is going to go in. They're going to look at my books. They're going to look at their books, and they're going to see if there's any antitrust issues or any competitive data that would show that it would cause strife to the consumer. So like if
there's no monopoly.
No monopoly. Yeah, like if Kroger and Albertsons merged, it's going to cause a hardship to the consumer, because then they're going to have complete control over pricing. Or if AT&T and T-Mobile merge, you know, that kind of thing. So they're checking us to see if the number one ready-to-drink cocktail merges with the number two ready-to-drink cocktail, what happens, you know, to ready-to-drink cocktail prices and the market in general. So this HSR approval, you need to decide with your strategic buyer if you want to go through a short HSR approval or a long HSR approval. The shortest is 30 days, and that's what I ended up going through with Sazerac, my buyer, because they don't do ready-to-drink cocktails. They do bourbon. They make Fireball. They make Buffalo Trace. They make Pappy Van Winkle. You know, very heavy in the bourbon space, very heavy in the liquid spirits side, like Taka Vodka and, anything that's a value brand on the bottom shelf at a liquor store, they've got too. But they've got 400 brands. And we just kind of append into the side of them with our ready to drink as an auxiliary product. So it brings them incremental income in a space that they weren't really number one in.
Wow, thank you for explaining that so eloquently and detailed, because a lot of us have not ever experienced that before, so it really helps you to plan ahead and know what to prepare for.
Yeah, you should actually start preparing your data room, even if you never think you're going to sell, just because you need it. And you might sell someday. I never thought I would sell, but when they show you big dollar signs like they did for mine, and you think about your family legacy, and you think about generational wealth, and you think about the timing of all the craziness that's happening in the world today, and you think about, is it selfish for me to hold on to my brand when I really need this kind of growth? And if I did it myself, I would get this kind of growth. It's like, you really want to make sure that if you really want to do the best thing for your company, what's really the best thing for your company?
So as an entrepreneur, a woman, a mom and wife who has accomplished so much already, because you embody her money moves, what's the next big thing on your horizon?
I don't know. I'm going to be working for the company for the next 4 years as the CEO, and I'm going to stay on board to make sure there's a smooth transition between my handoff to them and make sure they really have it. I don't have to, but I just want to, because it's my baby. It's something that means something to me. Other things that are important to me, I love to travel, and I just don't ever see myself kicking back, though, and doing nothing. I'll probably write a book or write a movie,
Hands down, you have to do that.
Oh, it would be fun. I think it would be really fun. Yes. So I've got some ideas in mind, but, you never know. I just can't sit still. What I'm dreaming bigger about is the next 3 years. I want to be a $5 billion company. I want to drive that company up to $5 billion, give those guys their money back for paying me. And, I want to make it a successful brand worldwide.
Yes. So let's toast to 5 billion.
Yes.
Let's do it. Congratulations. You really do epitomize a money mover. I mean, you are just such an inspiration and role model for all women entrepreneurs, for all entrepreneurs, period. I mean, the things that you've accomplished are unparalleled. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that our audience is going to be inspired to dig deep and to always believe in yourself and be true to yourself, and to go after your dreams. Now we see that it is possible.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.